She walked away with more than just memories. She took the one thing I thought I'd never lose. But what I did next? One phone call changed everything, and it wasn't just my life that turned upside down. My name is Ethan Parker. I'm a graphic designer living in Chicago, a job I love, but lately my world felt like it was falling apart. I used to believe everything was perfect or close enough. That was before Sarah left and took Max with her. Max wasn't just a dog. He was my best friend, my daily companion, the one who listened without judgment when nothing else made sense. Sarah and I had been together for almost 3 years. We met in college, bonded over bad coffee and late-night conversations about our dreams. Max came into our lives during the first year we moved into our little apartment. From the moment he bounded through the door, full of energy and slobber, I knew he was family. I spent hours teaching him tricks, watching him grow from a clumsy puppy into the loyal dog who greeted me every day like I was the most important person in the world. So when Sarah said she wanted to break up, it hit me like a punch I never saw coming. It wasn't just losing her, it was the way she did it. Cold, final. Then she took Max with her. I remember sitting on the couch after she left, the silence in the apartment crushing me more than I ever imagined. Max's bed was empty, his leash gone. The weight of it all settled in my chest. At first, I told myself it was just temporary, that she'd come back or that maybe Max would too. But days passed, then weeks. Every morning, I expected to hear the familiar paw steps or his excited bark when I walked through the door. Instead, there was only quiet. The apartment felt too big, too empty without them. I tried reaching out to Sarah, hoping she'd understand how much Max meant to me. But she avoided my calls and messages. She said it was her decision, that Max belonged with her now. That stung deeper than anything. The dog I had loved and cared for, my comfort in the darkest moments, was suddenly out of reach. That night I sat alone with my thoughts swirling, heart heavy with loss and betrayal. The sadness felt endless, but beneath it all, a spark flickered. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. I wasn't going to let this break me, not completely. After Sarah left with Max, the silence in my apartment was deafening. Every corner reminded me of what I had lost. The empty leash hanging by the door, the untouched dog food bowl in the kitchen, these little things screamed the absence louder than any words could. It wasn't just losing Sarah, it was losing Max, my daily companion and the one constant who made everything better. My mornings became a struggle. I used to wake up to Max's sloppy kisses and wagging tail, dragging me out of bed for a walk or just some playtime. Now I woke up alone, feeling the weight of emptiness pressing down on me. Work felt meaningless. The colors on my screen seemed duller, and the creativity that once fueled me seemed drained. I tried to focus on projects, but my mind kept drifting back to Max and the life I'd lost. Friends reached out. They invited me out, tried to cheer me up, but I felt like I was wearing a mask. On the surface, I smiled and nodded, but inside, the ache was constant. Nights were the hardest, lying awake, replaying memories of Max chasing a ball or curling up beside me. I missed his unconditional love. I missed the comfort of having someone who never judged me, who was always there no matter what. I kept hoping Sarah would come back, or that I could convince her to let me see Max again. But her silence was louder than any response. She blocked my calls, ignored my messages. The reality settled in. I was completely cut off from the one living being who made this breakup bearable. I felt like I was drowning in loneliness and regret. How did it come to this? Why had she taken Max without even a word? I questioned everything, the relationship, my choices, even myself. The pain was raw and I didn't know how to fix it. But amid the despair, a small, stubborn part of me refused to stay broken. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find a way to fight back, not with anger or bitterness, but with something I hadn't expected. A way to reclaim my life piece by piece. The weeks after the breakup felt endless, but slowly, a quiet anger began to grow inside me. It wasn't the explosive kind that screams or lashes out. It was a cold, steady fire burning beneath the surface. I realized that letting Sarah take Max without a fight wasn't just heartbreaking, it was unacceptable. I started to think less about what I'd lost and more about what I could still control. I couldn't undo the breakup, and I couldn't just wish Max back into my life. But maybe there was another way to get some justice, to show that I wasn't going to be the one left crushed in this mess. One evening, while scrolling aimlessly on my phone, I stumbled across an old message from Sarah bragging about how important her career had become. She worked in marketing at a startup, and from what I remembered, she was proud of how far she'd come. It hit me. If she could take Max from me, maybe I could find a way to touch something she cared about just as much. It felt strange at first, the idea of targeting her career. But beneath the anger, I told myself it wasn't about revenge. It was about balance, about reminding her that actions have consequences. I started quietly researching, trying to understand her work world, who she reported to, what her role really involved, and if there were any weak points I could use. Every piece of information I uncovered gave me a little more confidence. The fire inside me grew brighter, fueled by the possibility that I could fight back without stooping to bitterness or cruelty. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. At the same time, I kept missing Max. That hurt never went away, but I learned to channel it into focus, into patience, and into a plan. I didn't want to rush or make mistakes. I wanted this to be smart and clean, something that would bring me peace instead of more chaos. For the first time since the breakup, I felt like I was moving forward, not by forgetting what happened, but by refusing to be defined by it. The next steps wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. Once I decided to take control, I dove deeper into Sarah's world, quietly, carefully. I didn't want to make mistakes or get caught. It was like stepping into unfamiliar territory, but I was driven by a mix of determination and the memory of Max waiting somewhere out of reach. Sarah's marketing job at that startup was tougher to penetrate than I expected. It wasn't just about her position, but the people around her, the managers, the clients, even the company's reputation. I needed to find something real, something that could shake her world without crossing a line I'd regret. I spent nights piecing together details from social media, LinkedIn profiles, and the occasional slip she made during our last conversations. Slowly, a picture formed. Sarah was proud, yes, but she was also vulnerable in ways I hadn't imagined. There were rumors about a big project she was leading, one that could make or break her career. A single mistake that could cost her everything. The more I learned, the more the anger turned into a strange kind of calm focus. It wasn't about hurting her out of spite anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and standing up for myself. I pictured her at work under pressure, unaware that I was silently preparing my move. Every detail mattered. I tracked meetings, deadlines, and even the key players who could influence what happened next. I kept reminding myself this wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about balance and getting justice for what she took from me. By the end of that week, I felt ready. I had the information I needed and a clear sense of purpose. I wasn't the same broken guy from before. This plan was my way out of the dark, and there was no turning back now. The hardest part was waiting for the right moment. I knew one call could change everything, but I wanted to make sure it was perfect. The day I made that phone call, my hands were shaking more than I expected. It wasn't the fear of getting caught. It was the weight of what I was about to do. I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my phone, heart pounding with a strange mix of anxiety and resolve. This call wasn't just about Sarah's career. It was about reclaiming a part of myself I thought was lost forever. I dialed the number I had found after weeks of research, a key contact at Sarah's company. I kept my voice steady, calm, even friendly, masking the storm brewing inside me. Every word was carefully chosen, every pause deliberate. I laid out what I knew about the project, hinting at confidential information that I shouldn't have had, enough to make them question Sarah's role and decisions. It felt surreal, hearing the other person on the line absorb the information, their voice shifting as they asked questions and promised to look into it. I stayed silent, listening, feeling a strange power ripple through me. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about justice, about standing up for myself in the only way I knew how. After I hung up, a heavy silence filled the room. I wasn't sure if I'd done the right thing, but there was no turning back now. The next hours were a blur of waiting, heart racing every time my phone buzzed or rang. Part of me wanted to hear that everything was fine, while another part craved the chaos I knew was coming for Sarah. Then the messages started. Rumors spread quickly. Sarah's project was under review, her reputation questioned. I saw the cracks forming in her polished world, cracks that reminded me of the cracks she left in mine. As the news sank in, I felt a complex swirl of emotions. Satisfaction mixed with guilt, relief mixed with sadness. I hadn't expected this to feel so complicated. But one thing was clear, I was no longer powerless. For the first time since the breakup, I was taking control of my story. The fallout hit faster than I imagined. Within days, the whispers around Sarah's project turned into full-blown investigations. Her colleagues started distancing themselves, and I caught glimpses of her stress through mutual friends, texts, anxiety, panic, maybe even fear. Watching it all unfold was surreal. Part of me wanted to feel victorious, like I'd finally won back something she'd taken from me. But the truth was more complicated. I wasn't just watching Sarah's career unravel. I was watching someone I once loved struggle in a way I never wanted for her. Friends noticed the change in me, too. Some congratulated me quietly, others looked uncomfortable when I mentioned what had happened. I couldn't blame them. This wasn't a clean victory. It was messy and tangled with emotions I hadn't fully sorted out. I kept asking myself if I'd gone too far. Was this really about justice, or had I crossed a line into something darker? I tried to remind myself why I'd done it, because Sarah took Max from me because I felt powerless, and this was the only way I knew to fight back. But the doubts lingered, like shadows I couldn't shake. In the quiet moments, I missed Max more than ever. No amount of power or control could fill that hole. I realized that my fight wasn't just about getting even with Sarah. It was about reclaiming the parts of my life she had taken away. The aftermath brought a strange peace. I wasn't the same broken guy from before. I had learned that sometimes pain could be a catalyst for change, even if that change came wrapped in difficult choices. But the story wasn't over. The consequences were still coming for both of us, and I was about to face the hardest part yet. The days after Sarah's career started to unravel weren't easy for me. The victory I thought I'd feel was tangled with unexpected complications. Word got around faster than I expected, and soon enough, some people began asking questions about how the information got out. A few even hinted that I might be involved. Suddenly, I was not just a bystander anymore. I was part of the storm. The guilt I tried to push away started creeping back in. Was this really the way to heal? Or was I making things worse for both of us? Friends who had supported me began to worry I was losing myself in this fight. Then came the confrontation. Sarah reached out cold and sharp. She didn't want to talk about the past or the dog. She wanted answers. She wanted to know why I'd done this, what I hoped to gain from tearing her down. Our conversation was tense, filled with raw emotion on both sides. She accused me of being cruel and petty, but I told her how lost and powerless I'd felt when she took Max. I tried to explain that this wasn't just revenge. It was my way to stand up for myself when I thought I had nothing left. Despite the anger beneath her words, I sensed something else. Hurt, regret, maybe even understanding. It was the hardest conversation I'd had in months, but it forced me to face my own choices and their consequences. After we hung up, I was left with more questions than answers. Had I crossed a line? Was this fight really worth it? Or was it time to let go and find a way to heal? The fallout wasn't just about careers or broken relationships anymore. It was about facing the parts of myself I'd been avoiding, fear, anger, and the desperate need to find peace. After that call, Sarah and I finally met face to face. The air between us was thick with tension, memories, and unspoken pain. We sat across from each other in a small cafe, a place we used to visit together, but now it felt like a battleground. She looked different, tired, guarded. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something I wasn't sure I could give. I wasn't sure what I wanted either. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but instead I found myself wanting to understand. The conversation started rough. Accusations flew, voices rising. She told me how losing the project had affected her, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing everything she'd worked for. I told her about the emptiness I'd felt when she took Max, how losing him was like losing a piece of my soul. Slowly, the anger began to give way to something quieter, a shared sadness, a recognition of how much we'd both been hurt. For the first time, we talked not as enemies, but as two people broken by loss and mistakes. She admitted she never meant to hurt me that way, that taking Max was selfish, a way to hold on to something familiar when everything else felt like slipping away. I shared my regrets too, how my actions had spiraled beyond what I intended. In that moment, I realized this confrontation wasn't about winning or losing. It was about facing the mess we'd created together and finding a way forward, whether together or apart. The conversation didn't fix everything, but it broke down walls we'd built around ourselves. And sometimes that's where healing begins. After that confrontation, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in months, the chaos inside felt quieter. Talking to Sarah wasn't easy, far from it, but it gave me something I hadn't had since the breakup: closure. I realized that some wounds don't heal overnight, and some losses don't simply get reversed. Max was still with Sarah, and maybe for now, that was how it had to be. Holding on to anger or plans for revenge had only kept me stuck in pain. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant accepting what was and finding a way to move forward. I started focusing on myself again. Work slowly became more than just a distraction. It became a source of pride and purpose. I picked up new hobbies, reconnected with friends, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Being around dogs again helped heal the part of me that felt broken without Max. Most importantly, I began to forgive, not just Sarah, but myself. Forgiving meant releasing the bitterness that had weighed me down and opening the door to new possibilities. I wasn't the same person I was before the breakup, and I didn't want to be. The pain had changed me, but it had also made me stronger, more aware of what mattered most. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it with hope, with courage, and with an open heart. Life after the storm felt different, quieter, but filled with a new kind of strength. I learned that losing someone, even losing Max, didn't have to define me. Instead, it became a chapter that shaped who I was becoming. I kept volunteering at the animal shelter, finding joy in caring for dogs who needed love. It wasn't the same as having Max, but it helped fill the emptiness in my heart. Slowly, I opened myself up to new friendships and possibilities, realizing that I could build happiness on my own terms. Work grew more meaningful too. The focus and determination I'd channeled into my plan to confront Sarah found a new outlet, projects I cared about, goals I wanted to reach. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. I still thought about Sarah sometimes, but without the bitterness that used to cloud those memories. We were both broken in different ways, and maybe some wounds don't heal completely. But I had learned to carry them with grace, not as chains, but as reminders of growth. Most of all, I learned to trust myself again. To believe that even when life feels unfair or cruel, there's always a way forward, sometimes hidden in pain, sometimes found in unexpected moments of courage. My story wasn't about revenge or loss anymore. It was about resilience, forgiveness, and the power to start over. And as I looked toward the future, I knew one thing for sure. No matter what came next, I would face it with an open heart and the quiet strength of someone who refused to be broken.